The family photo still hung in the hallway, 5 smiling faces captured in a moment of perfection. But at my father's 60th birthday dinner, they set only 4 places at the table. I stood in the doorway, clutching my gift bag, watching as my sister Vanessa arranged the silverware with precision, fork, knife, napkin, 4 times over. My place at the table had been replaced by an elaborate floral centerpiece, roses and lilies erupting from a crystal vase like they belonged there. More than I did. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Oh, look who decided to show up, Vanessa announced, not bothering to hide her surprise. Everyone, Nathan actually made it. My mother turned, her face lighting up with genuine warmth as she hurried over to embrace me. You didn't say you were coming. I would have set another place. Last-minute decision, I said, returning her hug. Thought Dad deserved the full family experience for his big day. Well, this is unexpected, my father said, rising from his chair. His handshake was firm but brief, a business transaction rather than a greeting between father and son. We thought you'd be too busy with your, what are you calling it these days? Your venture? Vanessa snorted, not even trying to disguise it as a cough. You mean his little coding project? The one he abandoned his real career for? She gestured to the empty space beside her husband, Mark. Squeeze in here. We can make room. I took the awkwardly placed chair, now making 5 around a table set for 4. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. An afterthought, an accommodation rather than an expectation. The conversation swirled around me. Vanessa's recent promotion, her company's expansion plans, the neighborhood gossip I was no longer privy to since moving across town to a smaller apartment that fit my new budget. So, Nathan? Mark asked during a lull. Still working on that app thing? The one for, what was it again? Sustainable Building Management Systems, I supplied, taking a sip of water. And yes, Evergreen Tech is still very much operational. Vanessa's laugh was musical, but sharp-edged. Operational? Is that what we're calling it when a company hasn't turned a profit in 3 years? We're in development phase, I said evenly. Building something sustainable takes time. Oh, I'm sure, she said, exchanging a knowing look with my father. Very sustainable, especially since you left Meridian Partners to pursue it. What was your salary there again? 6 figures plus bonuses? My father nodded, the disappointment evident in his eyes. Senior investment analyst by 30. Fastest promotion in the firm's history. And then he threw it all away, Vanessa added, her voice dripping with false concern. For a dream. I focused on cutting my steak into perfectly even pieces. 3 years ago, I would have defended myself vigorously. I would have pulled out projected earnings reports, market analyses, venture capital interest letters. But I had learned that some silences were more powerful than explanations. Some truths didn't need defenders. Actually, my mother interjected, I read an article about green building technology being the future. It sounds fascinating, Nathan. Tell us more. Before I could respond, Vanessa's phone chimed. She glanced at it, her face lighting up with professional excitement. It's Deborah from the office. The Henderson deal just closed. She turned to Mark, squeezing his arm. That means the expansion is official. We're taking the entire 15th floor of the Astor building downtown. My father raised his glass. To Vanessa, the youngest VP in Pinnacle Solutions history, following in her old man's footsteps. To Vanessa, everyone echoed, except me. I raised my glass a beat later, the gesture nearly missed in the excitement. The Astor building, my mother mused. Isn't that the beautiful Art Deco one on Washington Street, with the blue-green glass? Vanessa nodded eagerly. 15 floors of premium office space. Completely renovated last year with state-of-the-art everything. Our company will occupy 3 full floors by next quarter. She turned to me, her smile a perfect blend of condescension and pity. That's what happens when you stick with the program, Nathan, when you don't chase pipe dreams. I took another slow sip of water. Congratulations. The Astor is a beautiful building. You've seen it? Mark asked, surprised I would know anything about premium real estate in my current financial state. I've been inside, yes, I said simply. Vanessa laughed. What? Did you have a job interview there? Are you finally giving up on the startup? Fantasy? My phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at it discreetly. A message from Maya, my business partner. The McKinley proposal had been accepted. Another client secured, another step forward. I smiled slightly and returned the phone to my pocket. Something amusing? My father asked. Just a work notification, I said. Work, Vanessa repeated, making air quotes with her fingers. Right. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The dessert arrived, my father's favorite chocolate cake, adorned with candles that cast dancing shadows across his face. The man who had taught me to throw a baseball and balance a checkbook, who had pushed me toward stability and security at every turn. The same man who had called my resignation from Meridian Partners the biggest mistake of your life and had barely spoken to me since. As everyone sang Happy Birthday, I joined in, watching the familiar faces illuminated by candlelight. My mother, supportive but conflict-averse. My father, proud of his conventional success. Vanessa, following his blueprint to perfection. And me, the family enigma, the cautionary tale, the one who veered off course. Make a wish, Dad, Vanessa urged. My father closed his eyes briefly, then blew out the candles in one strong breath. Everyone clapped. What did you wish for? My mother asked. Can't tell or it won't come true, he replied, but his glance in my direction spoke volumes. Something about me, about returning to the fold, about making choices he could understand. As the cake was being served, Vanessa turned to me, her expression softening slightly with what might have been genuine curiosity. Seriously though, Nathan, how are you actually managing? I know startups are challenging. For a moment, I considered telling her everything, about the sleepless nights and empty bank accounts, about the potential clients who ghosted us and the investors who wanted controlling interest, about the moment I nearly gave up, sitting in my apartment, with the electricity shut off, coding by the light of my laptop battery. But I also considered telling her about our recent breakthroughs, about the patents pending and the municipal contracts, about the silent investor who believed in us when no one else would, about the strange, winding path that had led me to purchase a significant share in a property management company that had recently acquired, among other assets, the Astor Building. I did neither. I'm managing, I said instead, accepting a slice of cake, day by day. If you ever need help getting back into the industry, my father offered, I still have connections at Meridian. They've expanded their environmental investment division. Might be a good fit given your interests. Thanks, Dad. I'll keep that in mind. Vanessa's phone chimed again. Sorry, it's work, she said, not sounding sorry at all. The moving company needs confirmation on the Astor timeline. Apparently, there's some paperwork with the building management. Anything serious? Mark asked. She shook her head. Just formalities. Standard lease agreements, security deposits, that sort of thing. The building management is very particular, but Deborah says they're surprisingly reasonable on rates. Premium location at mid-market prices. It's why we jumped on it. I nodded thoughtfully. Smart move. You have no idea, Vanessa said, typing a response on her phone. This move is going to transform our company. The Astor address alone adds prestige to our brand. She looked up at me, her expression a mixture of triumph and concern. You know, if your project doesn't work out, Pinnacle is always hiring in the junior developer program. You'd have to start at the bottom, of course, but it's better than nothing. The offer hung in the air, dripping with both genuine family concern and absolute certainty of my eventual failure. I recognized the sentiment behind it, the same one that had prompted my father to send me job listings every week for the first year after I left Meridian. The same one that led my mother to tactfully avoid mentioning my business when speaking to family friends. I appreciate the thought, I said carefully, but I'm committed to seeing Evergreen through. Stubbornness was always your weakness, my father sighed. Sometimes the wisest choice is knowing when to cut your losses. And sometimes, I countered quietly, the wisest choice is knowing what others can't yet see. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. My mother quickly changed the subject to my cousin's upcoming wedding, and the conversation drifted to safer waters. I participated just enough to be polite, but my mind was elsewhere, calculating timelines, reviewing contract terms, envisioning the meeting that would inevitably come when Vanessa discovered that her company's new lease agreement had been approved by a subsidiary of Green Horizon Properties, which itself was majority-owned by a silent partner she knew quite well. As dinner wound down, Vanessa pulled out her corporate credit card to pay the bill, waving away my offer to contribute. Please, Nathan, I've got this. Save your startup capital. She winked at Mark as she said it, an inside joke at my expense. The restaurant was one of those upscale bistros where success was measured in reservations secured months in advance, and entrees that cost as much as my weekly grocery budget. 3 years ago, I would have matched her gesture without thinking. Now, I accepted her charity with a nod, another data point in her narrative of my downfall. Outside, as we waited for the valet to bring around our respective vehicles, Vanessa elaborated on her company's expansion plans. The Astor Building was just the beginning, she explained. Pinnacle Solutions was positioning for acquisition by a larger tech firm, and the premium office space was part of making themselves attractive to potential buyers. The location alone adds 10% to our valuation, she said, checking her lipstick in her compact mirror. Plus, being surrounded by other innovative companies creates synergy. You remember what synergy is, right, Nathan? From your business? School days? My car arrived first, a modest 5-year-old hybrid that had replaced my luxury sedan when belt tightening became necessary. Vanessa eyed it with poorly disguised pity. Well, this was nice, she said, air-kissing my cheek. Don't be a stranger, Nathan. Family is family, even when they make choices we don't understand. I hugged my mother goodbye, shook my father's hand, and nodded to Mark. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of them in my rearview mirror, a perfect family portrait, minus the black sheep who had strayed from the prescribed path. The drive back to my apartment took me past the Astor Building, its distinctive blue-green glass catching the evening light. I pulled into the private underground garage, used my access card at the restricted elevator, and rode to the top floor, not to an office, but to the owner's penthouse that came with the building. A perk of the acquisition that I rarely used, but occasionally visited to remind myself how far I'd come. The space was minimally furnished, a desk, a sofa, a bed I almost never slept in. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city lights. I poured myself a modest glass of whiskey and sat at the desk, opening my laptop to review the quarterly reports from Green Horizon Properties. The Astor Building was just one asset in a growing portfolio. Not the largest, but certainly the most personally significant. I scrolled through the new tenant list, stopping at Pinnacle Solutions. 15-year lease agreement, option to expand to adjacent floors, generous improvement allowance. All approved by the management company I had quietly acquired after our sustainable building system caught the attention of a venture capital firm specializing in green technologies. Maya's message flashed on my screen. McKinley contract signed. That makes 7 municipal implementations. Still think we should have gone with your sister's company? I smiled, remembering the conversation 6 months ago when we'd discussed approaching Pinnacle Solutions as a potential client. Maya had made a strong case for it. They had the right profile, the right needs, the right budget. But I had steered us toward other opportunities, knowing that some bridges couldn't be rebuilt until both sides recognized they needed crossing. No, I typed back. Timing wasn't right, but it might be soon. 3 years of sacrifice. 3 years of being the family disappointment. 3 years of hearing my name mentioned with sighs and headshakes. All while building something I believed in, a system that made buildings more efficient, more sustainable, more cost-effective. A system that major property management companies were now competing to implement. Including, though they didn't know it yet, the company that managed the building where my sister would soon hang her new VP nameplate. I closed my laptop and walked to the windows, watching the city pulse below. Tomorrow, Vanessa would return to her office, confident in her path and pitying of mine. She would continue planning her company's triumphant move to the Astor building, unaware that her lease agreement bore the digital signature of the brother she believed was failing. Not that I needed her to know. Success didn't require recognition. To be real. Growth didn't need witnesses to occur. Sometimes the most powerful position was the one no one saw you occupying, until the moment when visibility became inevitable. The truth would emerge eventually, not through any grand revelation of my design, but through the natural unfolding of business processes. When Pinnacle Solutions moved into the Astor building, when they implemented the required energy management systems, when they discovered the building owner's identity, not through my announcement, but through their own due diligence. I wasn't planning a dramatic gotcha moment. That wasn't my style, and it wasn't my goal. My purpose had never been to prove my family wrong. It had been to prove myself right, to build something meaningful, something lasting, something that aligned with my values rather than someone else's expectations. If vindication came as a side effect, so be it. But it wasn't the destination. I finished my whiskey, took one last look at the city skyline, and headed back to my modest apartment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new steps forward on the path I had chosen. A path that had led me, through a series of unexpected turns, to become the owner of the building where my sister would soon proclaim her corporate success. Life had a poetry to it sometimes, not the loud, obvious kind that announced itself with fanfare, but the quiet, subtle kind that revealed itself only to those paying close attention. I was paying attention. And soon, whether she realized it or not, Vanessa would be too. The morning after my father's birthday dinner, I woke before dawn in my modest one-bedroom apartment. The space was small but intentional, everything I needed, nothing I didn't. A far cry from the luxury high-rise I'd lived in during my Meridian partners' days, but there was a freedom in the simplicity. No mortgage tying me down, no expensive furniture to worry about. Just a clean, functional space that let me focus on what mattered. I made coffee and stood by the window, watching the city slowly come alive. 3 years ago, I'd have been suited up by now, racing toward Meridian's glass tower to be at my desk before anyone else, working 14-hour days, chasing bonuses and promotions, measuring my worth in year-end reviews and comparison charts against my peers. The day I walked away still played in my mind sometimes. The stunned faces, the whispered conversations, the firm handshake from the managing partner who assured me I was making a catastrophic mistake. Green technology? Building management systems? Nathan, you're throwing away a career that people would kill for. My father had been more direct when I called to tell him. You're abandoning a sure thing for a fantasy, he'd said, disappointment heavy in his voice. Do you know how many startups fail in the first year? In the first 3 years? I did know. I'd run the numbers, calculated the risks, researched the market with the same analytical precision I'd applied to investment portfolios. The difference was that this time, the investment was my life, my values, my vision for a future I actually wanted to build, not just one I was expected to want. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Meeting with Brisbane developers moved to 9 a.m., bringing breakfast. Maya Chen had been my first and best decision when starting Evergreen Tech. A brilliant software engineer I'd met during a Meridian investment conference. She'd been working for a doomed startup that was hemorrhaging cash while sitting on revolutionary building efficiency algorithms. When that company folded, I'd reached out with a proposition. Join me in building something new, something with purpose. She'd laughed at first, the investment banker wanting to save the planet through smart buildings. But the business plan I'd spent 6 months developing had convinced her. "Your family still thinks you're crazy?" she'd asked during one of our earliest all-nighters when the code wasn't working and our seed money was dwindling faster than projected. "Certifiable," I'd confirmed. "My sister sends me job listings every week." "Mine wanted me to be a doctor," she'd said, fingers never pausing on her keyboard. "They've finally accepted that I'm going to disappoint them by saving the planet instead of individual patients." We'd laughed, finding solidarity in our shared rebellion against expectations. But the truth was, those early days had tested my resolve more than I'd ever admitted to anyone. There were nights I'd sat alone in my new, downsized apartment, surrounded by business plans and dwindling bank statements, questioning everything. Nights when Vanessa's voice echoed in my head. A pipe dream, a fantasy, a waste of potential. I showered and dressed simply. Jeans, a button-down shirt, no tie. Another departure from my previous life of custom suits and designer ties. My closet now held clothes I actually wore rather than clothes meant to impress others. A small freedom, but one I'd come to appreciate. The ride to our office took 15 minutes on my electric bike, another intentional choice that saved money, reduced my carbon footprint, and kept me grounded in the principles Evergreen Tech was built on. Our headquarters occupied the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse in the city's developing innovation district. Not glamorous by Meridian standards, but perfect for our needs. Open, collaborative, sustainably renovated, and most importantly, affordable. Maya was already there when I arrived, arranging bagels and coffee on the conference table. At 32, she was a year younger than me, but carried herself with a confident ease I sometimes envied. No second-guessing, no looking backward, just forward motion toward our shared vision. "Brisbane's bringing their full team," she said, pulling up the presentation on her tablet, "including their sustainability officer, which is a good sign." I nodded, scanning the latest revisions to our proposal. Brisbane Development was a mid-sized real estate company specializing in mixed-use urban projects, exactly the kind of partner we needed to scale our building management systems beyond individual properties to entire city blocks. "Did you have a chance to review the energy consumption projections?" I asked. Maya swiped to a detailed graph. "Updated last night. Our system would reduce their portfolio's energy use by 32% in year 1, 41% by year 3. Cost savings of approximately $8 million annually once fully implemented." I studied the numbers, mentally translating them into the financial language that would resonate with Brisbane's executives. This was where my Meridian background proved invaluable. I understood how developers thought, what motivated their decisions, how to frame environmental benefits in terms of long-term profitability. "Let's lead with the ROI timeline," I suggested. "Show them they'll recoup implementation costs within 14 months. Maya nodded, making the adjustment. "How was your dad's birthday dinner?" I shrugged. "Predictable. My sister's company is moving to the Astor building. She made sure everyone knew what a big deal it is." "The Astor?" Maya looked up, eyebrows raised. "As in our Astor?" "The very same." A slow smile spread across her face. "Does she know?" "Not yet," I said. and I'm not planning to make an announcement. But eventually she'll find out that her brother, the failure, the dreamer, owns the building her company is leasing. Eventually, I agreed. But that's not the point. Maya studied me for a moment. You're a better person than I am, Nathan. If it were my sister, I'd have the reveal planned down to the second. I smiled but shook my head. It's not about proving her wrong. It's about building something right. The truth was more complicated, of course. There was a part of me, a small human part, that anticipated the moment of recognition with a certain satisfaction. Not triumph, not vindication exactly, but acknowledgement. The same part that had stayed silent at dinner rather than defending my choices or explaining my successes. The part that understood some truths needed to be discovered rather than declared. Our team began arriving, a modest crew of 12 talented people who'd chosen purpose over prestige, impact over income. Engineers, designers, sustainability experts, all united by the belief that buildings could be smarter, greener, more efficient. People who'd taken pay cuts to join us, who worked longer hours for less recognition than they'd get at larger firms, who believed in what we were building. I watched them gather, exchanging ideas, refining the presentation, preparing for the meeting that could potentially double our implementation footprint. Not one of them knew about my connection to the Astor building. Not one of them knew that their modest, unassuming CEO had quietly channeled his first significant profits into real estate investments, rather than flashy expansions or personal luxuries. The decision had been both strategic and personal. Strategic, because diversification made sense, because property ownership created stability, because the building management systems we were developing needed physical spaces for testing and implementation. Personal, because there was a certain poetry in investing in the very structures we were working to transform. The Brisbane team arrived promptly at 9, 5 executives in business casual, carrying tablets and curious expressions. I greeted them with handshakes and genuine enthusiasm, not the polished corporate charm I'd performed at Meridian, but something more authentic, more connected to the work itself. "Before we begin," said Martin Brisbane, the company's silver-haired founder, "I want to be transparent. We're talking to 3 different system providers this week. We're committed to increasing our portfolio's sustainability, but the bottom line matters. We need solutions that work financially." I nodded. We wouldn't expect anything less. What we're offering isn't just an environmental choice, it's a business advantage. Let us show you how. For the next 2 hours, we walked them through our system's capabilities, our implementation process, our results from existing clients. Maya demonstrated the interface. Our engineers explained the technical specifications, and I translated everything into financial projections and competitive advantages. "These numbers are impressive," Martin said eventually, studying the projected savings. "But your company is still relatively small, relatively young. How do we know you'll be around to support these systems 5 years from now? 10 years from now?" It was the question I'd heard countless times, the doubt that came with being a startup in a field dominated by established players. 3 years ago, it would have stung. Now, I welcomed it as an opportunity. "Fair concern," I acknowledged. "Let me address it directly. First, our company is structured for sustainable growth, not quick profits. We're privately held, debt-free, and operate with disciplined overhead. Second, our client retention rate is 100%. Every client who has implemented our system remains a client, with service contracts renewed at a 96% rate. Third, we have strategic partnerships with 3 property management firms that provide additional stability. What I didn't mention was Green Horizon Properties, the investment vehicle through which I'd acquired minority stakes in buildings across the city, including the Astor. A separate entity on paper connected to Evergreen only through me. A safety net I'd constructed slowly, carefully, without fanfare or announcement. Martin nodded slowly, And your own background? My team tells me you came from finance, not technology. Meridian Partners, I confirmed. Senior investment analyst, specializing in commercial real estate portfolios. I understand both sides of this equation, the technology that makes buildings smarter and the financial structures that make them viable. Another executive leaned forward. So, why leave a lucrative position to start? This? He gestured around our modest office. It was a question that echoed my father's bewilderment, my sister's condescension. A question I'd answered so many times that my response had evolved from defensive justification to simple truth. Because buildings account for nearly 40% of global carbon emissions, I said. Because the technology exists to change that dramatically, without sacrificing profitability. Because I saw an opportunity to build something that creates value in multiple dimensions: financial, environmental, social. And because this work aligns with my values in a way that maximizing investor returns alone never did. The room went quiet for a moment. Then Martin nodded again, more decisively this time. Well, I appreciate the honesty, he said. Most pitches we hear are all about disruption and unicorn potential. Refreshing to hear someone talk about sustainable growth and aligned values. The meeting ended with handshakes and promises to be in touch within 2 weeks. As they left, Maya nudged me. That went well. We'll see, I said. But I felt the same cautious optimism. Brisbane would be our largest client to date if they signed on. A turning point for Evergreen both financially and reputationally. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings, code reviews, and client calls. At 6, while most of the team headed home, I stayed behind to review the quarterly financials. Maya lingered in the doorway of my office. You're doing that thing again, she observed. What thing? That thing where you work until midnight even though we're finally at a point where you don't have to. I looked up from my computer and offered a half smile. Old habits. Speaking of old habits, she said, leaning against the doorframe. I ran into someone from your Meridian days at the tech mixer last week. Mentioned you were my business partner. I raised an eyebrow. And they were shocked. Said you had been on a fast track to partnership before you lost your mind and threw it all away. She made exaggerated air quotes. Their words, not mine. I laughed softly. Sounds about right. That's still the official narrative. Does it bother you? That people you used to work with think you failed? I considered the question seriously. Less than it used to. What about you? Does it bother you that your parents still introduce you as my daughter who was pre-med? She grinned. Touché. See you tomorrow, boss. After she left, I finished reviewing the financials, then clicked over to another window, the property management software for Green Horizon. The Astor Building's tenant list now officially included Pinnacle Solutions, my sister's company. Move-in date scheduled for next month, with preliminary systems integration work starting next week, which meant that very soon, Pinnacle would be interfacing with Evergreen's building management system, the same system Vanessa had dismissed as a little coding project at my father's birthday dinner. The same system that would control the environmental settings, security access, and energy usage for her new executive office with its premium view. I hadn't planned it this way. When I'd first explored real estate investment as a way to stabilize our company's finances, the Astor Building had simply been a solid opportunity, undervalued due to outdated systems, prime for the kind of technological upgrade Evergreen specialized in. The fact that Pinnacle Solutions later chose to lease space there was corporate coincidence, the kind of random intersection that happens in business all the time. But now that it had happened, now that the paths of my failed startup and my sister's successful career were about to cross in ways she couldn't yet imagine, I found myself wondering how the revelation would unfold. Not planning for it, not engineering it, just curious about the moment when the narrative she'd constructed about my choices would collide with the reality she hadn't bothered to see. My phone buzzed with a text message. Vanessa. Hey, little brother. Mom's planning a family dinner next Sunday. She's worried about you, says you seemed thin at Dad's birthday. Should I tell her you'll be there? I stared at the message, reading between its lines. The concern wrapped in judgment. The assumption that I needed family dinners more than they needed my presence. The subtle reinforcement of the roles we'd been playing since childhood. Vanessa, the successful one. Nathan, the one who needed watching. Thanks for the heads up. I typed back. I'll be there. Another message came almost immediately. Great. OBTW, you'll never guess who I ran into today. Jason from your old Meridian team. He asked about you. I told him you were exploring alternative career paths. Hope that was okay? I could picture the conversation perfectly. The knowing looks, the professional sympathy, the shared certainty that I had made a catastrophic mistake. Jason, who had been 2 years behind me at Meridian, now probably occupying an office similar to the one I'd vacated. Vanessa, playing the role of the concerned sister who still believed in her brother's potential despite his inexplicable detour. Perfect, I replied. That's exactly what I'm doing. I shut down my computer and gathered my things. Outside, the city was transitioning from workday to evening. The streets filled with people heading home or out for dinner. The office towers, including the Astor Building, illuminated against the darkening sky. As I unlocked my bike, my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, then decided to answer. Nathan Reeves, I said. Mr. Reeves, this is Martin Brisbane. Hope I'm not calling too late. I straightened, immediately, alert. Not at all, Mr. Brisbane. What can I do for you? I wanted to cut through the usual corporate dance, he said, his voice direct but friendly. We're going with Evergreen for our system implementation. Your presentation today answered our questions, and frankly, your approach aligns with our company values better than the bigger providers. For a moment, I was speechless. The Brisbane contract represented more than just revenue. It was validation, expansion, the kind of client that would attract others. That's excellent news, I managed. We're excited to work with Brisbane Development. There's one more thing, Martin continued. I did some additional research on you personally after our meeting. Impressive move, leaving Meridian at the peak of your career there. Takes courage to walk away from that kind of trajectory to build something new. I wasn't sure how to respond. I appreciate that perspective. Not everyone sees it that way. Well, I've been in business long enough to recognize the difference between someone chasing quick success and someone building something meaningful, he said. Looking forward to working with you, Nathan. My team will be in touch tomorrow with the paperwork. After we hung up, I stood there on the sidewalk, bike in hand, letting the moment sink in. The Brisbane contract would nearly double our client base. The implementation would create 5 new jobs at Evergreen. The reference value alone would open doors that had previously been closed to us. Success didn't always announce itself with fanfare. Sometimes it arrived in quiet phone calls, in growing client lists, in problems solved and systems improved. Sometimes it looked exactly like what others had called failure, until suddenly, it didn't. I pushed my bike toward home, passing the glossy buildings where I'd once imagined my future unfolding. The path I'd taken instead hadn't been easier or more certain, but it had been mine. And now, as Evergreen grew and Green Horizon expanded, as my sister prepared to move her company into a building she didn't know I owned, as my father continued to hope for my return to the career he understood, I found myself unexpectedly grateful for their doubt. It had clarified my resolve. It had stripped away anything performative about my success, forcing me to build something solid enough to withstand skepticism. It had taught me that true achievement didn't require constant witnesses or external validation. It required only the consistent application of values, vision, and work. The revelation that awaited Vanessa wasn't one I needed to orchestrate or accelerate. It would arrive in its own time, through the natural unfolding of business processes. And when it did, when the narrative she'd constructed about my choices collided with the reality she hadn't bothered to see, the moment wouldn't be about proving her wrong. It would be about showing her, showing all of them, that there were many valid paths to success, many ways to create value, many forms of achievement beyond the narrow definitions they recognized. And perhaps most importantly, it would be about demonstrating that sometimes the people you dismiss today might be signing your lease agreement tomorrow, not because they set out to prove you wrong, but because they were too busy proving themselves right to notice your doubt along the way. The day Pinnacle Solutions began moving into the Astor building dawned bright and clear. I watched from across the street, coffee in hand, as the moving trucks lined up at the loading dock and teams of workers wheeled in furniture, equipment, and the countless boxes that contained my sister's corporate life. An entire fleet of vehicles emblazoned with the Pinnacle logo, a small army of movers coordinated by harried-looking office managers with clipboards and schedules. Vanessa arrived at 9:15, stepping out of her luxury sedan with practiced confidence. Designer briefcase in one hand, phone in the other, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. She paused to look up at the building, her company's new home, my quiet investment, before disappearing through the revolving doors. From my vantage point in the coffee shop across the street, I could almost feel her satisfaction, her sense of arrival. Another milestone in her meticulously plotted career trajectory. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Systems integration team reporting that Pinnacle's IT department is being difficult about access protocols. Surprise, surprise. I smiled slightly. Of course they were being difficult. Pinnacle Solutions had built its reputation on being cutting-edge, innovative, disruptive. All the buzzwords that tech companies wielded like badges of honor. The idea that they would need to conform to a building-wide management system rather than implementing their own proprietary solutions would undoubtedly ruffle feathers. Tell the team to be patient but firm, I texted back. Building regulations are non-negotiable. If they escalate, direct them to Green Horizon Management, which would eventually lead to me, though through enough administrative layers that the connection wasn't immediately obvious. I had intentionally maintained separation between Evergreen Tech and Green Horizon Properties, partly for legitimate business reasons, partly to avoid any appearance of conflict of interest, and yes, partly to preserve the eventual revelation that would come when Vanessa discovered her brother's role in her company's new home. My coffee finished, I crossed the street and entered the Astor building through a side entrance, using my owner's access card to bypass the main lobby where Pinnacle employees were queuing for their new security credentials. The private elevator whisked me to the top floor, not to the penthouse this time, but to the building management office that occupied half of the top level. Lisa Chen, Green Horizon's building manager for the Astor, greeted me with professional courtesy. At 52, she brought decades of property management experience to the role, having joined the company when I acquired the building. She knew of my connection to Evergreen Tech and had been instrumental in implementing our systems throughout the property. "Mr. Reeves," she said, "perfect timing. We're having some interesting conversations with the new tenants on 15. Pinnacle," I supplied. "What seems to be the issue?" Lisa pulled up a series of emails on her screen. Their IT director is insisting that their proprietary environmental controls should override the building system. I've explained that's not possible given the integrated nature of our infrastructure, but they're being rather insistent. I skimmed the email thread, increasingly terse exchanges between Lisa's team and Pinnacle's IT department, CCing higher-level executives as the disagreement escalated. My sister's name appeared in the most recent message. Vanessa Reeves, VP of Operations, We'll be reaching out to discuss this matter further. Has she called yet? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Scheduled for 11:30, Lisa replied. She requested to speak with the building owner or highest available authority. A small, involuntary smile tugged at my lips. And what did you tell her? That the owner isn't available, but the building manager has full authority to address tenant concerns. Lisa gave me a knowing look. As per your standard instructions. I nodded appreciatively. Perfect. Would you mind if I observed the call? Purely for quality assurance purposes. Lisa raised an eyebrow but nodded. Of course, though I should warn you, based on the tone of these emails, it may not be the most pleasant conversation. I'm familiar with the company culture, I said mildly, and I trust your diplomacy skills completely. For the next 2 hours, I reviewed property reports in Lisa's office, getting updates on the building's performance metrics, tenant satisfaction scores, and maintenance schedules. The Astor had been a sound investment, occupancy at 94% and climbing, operating costs decreasing since implementing evergreen systems, property value appreciating steadily in a challenging market. At precisely 11:30, Lisa's phone rang. She put it on speaker and gave me a subtle nod. Lisa Chen, building manager. Hello, Ms. Chen. This is Vanessa Reeves, VP of Operations at Pinnacle Solutions. My sister's voice filled the room. Professional, authoritative, with the slight edge that signaled she was prepared to be difficult if necessary. I understand there's some confusion regarding our company's environmental control systems. No confusion, Ms. Reeves, Lisa replied calmly. The Astor building operates on an integrated management system that controls environmental settings, security, and energy usage for the entire property. It's outlined in Section 8, 3 of your lease agreement. A brief pause. Yes, I'm looking at that now. However, what's not clear is why Pinnacle can't implement our own supplementary systems within our leased floors. We have cutting-edge technology that our teams are accustomed to using. I could picture my sister's expression, the slight furrow between her eyebrows that appeared whenever she encountered resistance, the way she would be tapping her pen against her desk as she spoke. The building system is designed for optimal efficiency across all floors, Lisa explained. Separate systems would create conflicts in the building's overall energy management. However, I can arrange for your IT team to meet with our systems provider to discuss customization options within the existing framework. Another pause, longer this time. Your systems provider, Vanessa repeated. And who would that be? Evergreen Technologies, Lisa answered. They're the industry leader in sustainable building management systems. The silence that followed contained multitudes. I could almost hear the wheels turning in my sister's mind, the name registering, the possibilities being considered and dismissed. Evergreen Technologies, my company. The little coding project she'd mocked at family dinners. Evergreen, she finally said, her voice carefully controlled. I see. And this system, it's mandatory for all tenants? Yes, Ms. Reeves. It's part of what makes the Astor one of the most energy-efficient buildings in the city. Your company will benefit from the reduced operating costs, which are passed on through lower utility charges. I understand the benefits, Vanessa said, a new tension in her voice. What I'm trying to determine is whether there's any flexibility in this arrangement. Perhaps if I spoke directly with the building owner. The owner reviews all system decisions, Lisa interjected smoothly, but has given management full authority in these matters. I'd be happy to note your concerns in my weekly report. I admired Lisa's professionalism. No hint that the owner was sitting 3 feet away, listening to every word. That's not necessary, Vanessa said after a moment. Instead, I'd like to schedule that meeting you mentioned, between our IT team and your system provider. The sooner the better. Of course, I'll reach out to Evergreen today and coordinate calendars. Thank you, my sister said, then added with forced casualness. Out of curiosity, Who's your primary contact at Evergreen? Lisa glanced at me, eyebrow raised in silent question. I gave a small nod. Nathan Reeves is the CEO, she answered. He oversees all implementations personally. Another weighted silence. Nathan Reeves, Vanessa repeated, my name in her mouth suddenly cautious. Questioning. I see. Thank you for your time, Ms. Chen. Please have your assistant coordinate the meeting details with my office. The call ended. Lisa looked at me expectantly. Well, I said, that was interesting. Should I be aware of anything regarding Pinnacle Solutions? She asked carefully. I considered how much to share. Lisa was an excellent building manager and a discreet professional, but I generally kept my personal life separate from business relationships. Vanessa Reeves is my sister, I said simply. We have different perspectives on career success. Lisa's eyes widened slightly, but her professional demeanor remained intact. I see. Would you prefer I handle the Evergreen meeting coordination, or? Please proceed as you would with any tenant, I said. No special treatment in either. Direction? Pinnacle signed the same lease agreement as everyone else in this building. She nodded, understanding the subtext. No preferential treatment, but also no petty power plays or unnecessary difficulties. This wasn't about family dynamics. It was about sound business practices. As I left the management office, my phone buzzed with a text. Vanessa. Interesting coincidence about our new building using Evergreen systems. We should catch up soon. Lunch tomorrow? Not a question about whether I knew about the connection. Not an acknowledgement that the little coding project she'd dismissed had become the industry leader her building manager had referenced. Just an invitation to lunch, as if we regularly dined together. As if this were merely an amusing coincidence. Worth discussing over salads. Sorry, booked solid this week, I replied. Brisbane Development Implementation Kickoff. Her response came quickly. Brisbane? That's a big client. Well done. Dinner Sunday at Mom and Dad's instead? The casual congratulations felt strange after years of gentle mockery and concerned glances. Had a single building manager's offhand comment about Evergreen being an industry leader really shifted her perception so dramatically? Or was it something else? The realization that our professional worlds were suddenly, unexpectedly overlapping. Sunday works, I texted back. Then I added, enjoy the new office. The Astor has excellent views from the 15th floor. I let that sit, not explicitly confirming any connection to the building, but leaving just enough for her to wonder. Sometimes the most powerful move wasn't dramatic revelation, but subtle suggestion, creating space for others to discover truths at their own pace. The rest of the week passed in a blur of meetings, code reviews, and implementation planning. The Brisbane contract had energized our team, validating our approach and opening conversations with potential clients who had previously considered us too small or too new to trust with their building systems. Friday afternoon, as I was reviewing the quarterly projections with our CFO, Maya appeared in my doorway looking uncharacteristically hesitant. We have a situation, she said. Pinnacle Solutions is requesting an urgent meeting with our executive team. Apparently, they're experiencing significant issues with the Astor building implementation. I raised an eyebrow. What kind of issues? According to their IT director, the system is overriding their attempts to adjust environmental settings in their executive offices. Specifically, the corner office on the northeast side of floor 15. Vanessa's office, the prime location, with the premium view. The space from which she would direct her growing department and impress visitors with Pinnacle's corporate success. Is there an actual technical problem? I asked. Maya shook her head. The system is functioning exactly as designed. Their people are trying to circumvent the energy management protocols by manually overriding temperature settings beyond the programmed parameters. The system keeps restoring optimal settings after detecting the irregularities. I suppressed a smile. Of course, Vanessa would want her office cooler or warmer than the building's energy-efficient standards allowed. Of course, she would expect exceptions to the rules that applied to everyone else. Of course, she would consider it a significant issue when the system designed to prioritize sustainability over individual preferences did exactly that. "When do they want this meeting?" I asked. "That's the thing," Maya said, looking distinctly uncomfortable now. "They've escalated to Green Horizon Properties, demanding to speak directly with building ownership about evergreen system limitations. Apparently, they're threatening to break their lease if the issues aren't resolved." And there it was. The moment of convergence, arriving not through my orchestration but through Vanessa's own impatience with rules that inconvenienced her. I could delay it further, maintain the separation between my various roles for a while longer. Or I could step into the clarity that had been building since Pinnacle first signed their lease. "Set up the meeting," I said after a moment. "Monday morning, here at our office. Include Lisa Chen from Building Management and make sure the invitation clearly states that representatives from both Evergreen Tech and Green Horizon Properties will be present to address their concerns." Maya studied my face. "You're ready for this, then? For your sister to know?" "It was always going to happen eventually," I said. "Might as well be on our terms, in our space, addressing legitimate system questions rather than making exceptions based on personal relationships." The weekend arrived with an unusual weight of anticipation. Sunday dinner at my parents' home now carried added significance. The last family gathering before Vanessa would officially learn that her brother, the family disappointment, owned the building her company now occupied. The last opportunity for her to treat me with the mild condescension that had characterized our relationship since I left Meridian. I arrived exactly on time, a bottle of wine in hand, and found my mother in the kitchen preparing her signature roast chicken. "Nathan," she exclaimed, embracing me warmly. "You look well. More color in your cheeks than last time." "Business is good," I said simply. "How are you, Mom?" She launched into updates about neighbors and friends, her volunteer work, the book club she'd recently joined. I listened attentively, asking questions, engaging fully with her life in a way that had become easier as my own path had stabilized. The early days of Evergreen had been so consuming, so precarious, that I'd had little emotional energy left for family connections. Now, with the company growing steadily and my confidence in our direction unshakable, I could be more present, more generous in my attention. My father emerged from his study, greeting me with a firm handshake that had evolved from disappointed to cautiously respectful over the past year. He didn't fully understand or approve of my choices yet, but he'd stopped sending me job listings, which constituted significant progress. "Nathan," he said, "your mother tells me you've landed the Brisbane account. Respectable company. Martin Brisbane builds solid properties." "Thanks, Dad. It's an important step for us." He nodded, not quite ready to acknowledge that my little coding project had become a viable business, but no longer dismissing it outright. Progress, however incremental. Vanessa and Mark arrived last, sweeping in with gifts and stories and the subtle air of importance that accompanied them everywhere. My sister embraced me with the particular enthusiasm she reserved for public displays of family affection. "Nathan," she said, holding me at arm's length to examine me. "You look prosperous. Business must be booming." "It's moving in the right direction," I acknowledged. "How's the new office? All settled in?" A flicker of something, annoyance, suspicion, crossed her face before she smiled brightly. "Gorgeous space. Though we're having some issues with the building management systems. Nothing major." "Oh?" my mother inquired, always eager for conversational details. "What kind of issues?" "Just technical details," Vanessa said dismissively. "The building uses an integrated system that's a bit restrictive. We're meeting with the provider on Monday to sort it out." "Which provider?" my father asked, more engaged now that the DAOM Conversation had turned to business specifics. Vanessa glanced at me, the slightest hesitation before answering. Actually, it's Nathan's company, Evergreen. Quite a coincidence. Nathan's company? My mother repeated, looking between us with surprise. Your building uses Nathan's systems? Apparently so, Vanessa said lightly. Small world, isn't it? Mark laughed. Not that small when you consider there are only a handful of companies doing this kind of work at scale. Vanessa was just saying yesterday how Evergreen has apparently become quite the player in the sustainable building space. Weren't you, honey? The subtle realignment was fascinating to observe. My sister and her husband already adjusting their narrative about my company, positioning themselves as having recognized my success all along. Not Nathan's little coding project anymore, but quite the player in the sustainable building space. That's wonderful, my mother exclaimed. My children, working together in a way. Nathan's company making Vanessa's building more efficient. If only she knew the full extent of the connection. But that revelation belonged to tomorrow's meeting, not tonight's family dinner. It is nice, I agreed mildly. Though I hope we can resolve the issues Vanessa mentioned to everyone's satisfaction. I'm sure we will, my sister said with practiced confidence. It's just a matter of finding the right balance between your system's standards and our company's specific needs. I nodded noncommittally, accepting the glass of wine my father offered. The conversation drifted to other topics. Mark's recent golf tournament, my mother's upcoming charity gala, my father's thoughts on interest rate trends, normal family dinner territory, safe and predictable. But something had shifted subtly, a recalibration of status that remained largely unspoken. Vanessa still commanded the conversation, still positioned herself as the family success story, but her references to my work had acquired a new respectful caution. No more jokes about dabbling in technology or suggestions that I consider returning to finance. No more pitying glances or unsolicited career advice. Just the careful dance of someone who had begun to suspect that the narrative she'd constructed about her brother might be due for significant revision. As dinner concluded and we moved to the living room for coffee, Vanessa maneuvered to sit beside me on the sofa, her voice lowered for privacy. So, she said casually, how familiar are you with the Astor Building's systems? Will you be at the meeting tomorrow? I met her gaze directly. I'm very familiar with the Astor. And yes, I'll be at the meeting. Good, she said, nodding as if this confirmed something she'd suspected. I think it will be more productive having someone knowledgeable involved. I imagine it will be quite productive, I agreed. More illuminating than you might expect. She studied my face for a moment, searching for hidden meanings. Nathan, is there something specific I should know before this meeting? Something about Evergreen's relationship with the Astor Building? The direct question hung between us, an opportunity to reveal everything now, privately, before the corporate unveiling tomorrow. Part of me was tempted. It would be easier, perhaps kinder, to prepare her for what was coming. But another part recognized that some lessons needed to be experienced rather than explained. That the impact of discovering that her brother owned her company's building would be more meaningful if it occurred in the professional context where she had most thoroughly dismissed my capabilities. Just that we take our building partnerships very seriously, I said eventually. The systems we've implemented at the Astor represent our best work. I think tomorrow's meeting will clarify everything. She seemed unsatisfied with this answer but nodded anyway. I look forward to it then. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the strange journey that had led to tomorrow's meeting. 3 years of being underestimated by my family. 3 years of building something they couldn't yet see the value in. 3 years of letting their doubt clarify my vision rather than derail it. And now, the moment of recognition approaching not because I had sought it out, but because the natural progression of our separate paths had created an inevitable intersection. not engineered for vindication, but arrived at through authentic purpose and consistent work. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own opportunities for growth. Not just for Vanessa, who would need to reconcile her perception of her failing brother with the reality of his success, but for me as well. Testing. My ability to handle the revelation with grace rather than triumph, with professionalism rather than petty satisfaction. The true measure of success wasn't in proving others wrong. It was in remaining true to your vision when no one else could see it. In building something solid enough to withstand doubt, substantial enough to eventually speak for itself. Tomorrow, the Astor Building would speak. And for once, my sister would have no choice but to listen. Monday morning arrived with the particular clarity that follows nights of minimal sleep. I had risen at 4, unable to quiet my mind, and spent the pre-dawn hours finalizing preparations for the day ahead. Not just for the meeting with Pinnacle Solutions, but for the Brisbane implementation kickoff, the quarterly board report, and the 3 client calls scheduled before lunch. A day like any other at Evergreen Tech, except for the pivotal revelation that would redefine my professional relationship with my sister. By 7, I was at the office, reviewing the Astor Building's system logs to understand exactly what modifications Pinnacle's IT team had attempted. The data confirmed Maya's assessment: multiple override attempts on the executive floor, particularly in the northeast corner office. Temperature adjustments beyond the system's energy-efficient parameters, lighting configurations that contradicted the building's sustainability protocols, automated scheduling that would have created wasteful power consumption during off hours. All precisely the kind of inefficiencies our system was designed to prevent. All exactly what I would have expected from Vanessa, who had always prioritized personal comfort and immediate convenience over long-term sustainability. "You're early," Maya observed, appearing in my doorway with 2 coffee cups. She handed me one and settled into the chair across from my desk. "Nervous about the big reveal?" I accepted the coffee gratefully. Not nervous, just preparing. For the technical questions, or for your sister realizing her little brother owns her company's building? Both, I admitted, though I doubt the technical aspects will be her primary concern once the ownership structure becomes clear. Maya studied me over the rim of her cup. "You know, most people in your position would be planning a dramatic moment, some grand gesture to maximize the impact when she realizes the truth." I shook my head. "That's not why I'm doing this." "I know," she said simply. "That's why it matters." The truth was, I had imagined this moment countless times over the past months. The look on Vanessa's face when she discovered that her brother, the family disappointment, the one who had thrown away his promising career for a little coding project, was now her company's landlord. I had pictured her shock, her recalibration, her sudden need to revise the narrative she'd constructed about my choices. But I had never orchestrated it, never manipulated events to maximize her discomfort or my vindication. The revelation that awaited her was simply the natural consequence of our separate paths intersecting through honest business decisions. And my response to her discovery would reveal more about my character than her reaction ever could about hers. At precisely 9:28 a.m., Lisa Chen from Building Management arrived, professional and composed as always. I briefed her quickly on our approach, address the technical concerns first, explain the system parameters and the reasoning behind them, then clarify the ownership structure only if directly relevant to resolving Pinnacle's issues. "So I should not lead with the fact that you own the building?" she confirmed. "Let's focus on the system functionality first," I said. "The ownership question will arise organically." At 9:45, our receptionist announced the arrival of the Pinnacle Solutions team. I watched on the security monitor as they entered the lobby, Vanessa leading the way, followed by her IT director and 2 technical staff members. My sister looked immaculate as always, her expression composed but determined, ready for battle with the unreasonable system providers who were inconveniencing her company's operations. "Show them to the main conference room," I instructed. Maya, and I will be there in 5 minutes. Those 5 minutes were deliberate, not to keep them waiting out of petty power plays, but to give myself the mental space to approach this meeting with the right mindset. This wasn't about settling scores or proving points. It was about demonstrating through actions rather than words that I had built something valuable, something meaningful, something worth the years of doubt and dismissal. When Maya and I entered the conference room, Vanessa was standing at the window, back turned to the door, admiring the view of the city skyline. She pivoted as we entered, her professional smile freezing slightly as our eyes met. "Nathan," she said, recovering quickly. "I thought you might join us, but I wasn't certain." Her gaze shifted to Maya, questioning. "Vanessa," I greeted her, with a brief nod. "This is Maya Chen, Evergreen's co-founder and chief technology officer. Maya, my sister Vanessa Reeves, VP of Operations at Pinnacle Solutions." Maya extended her hand, which Vanessa shook automatically, her poised exterior betraying only the slightest hint of confusion. "Your sister," she repeated, glancing between us. "You didn't mention that yesterday." "It didn't seem relevant to the technical issues we're here to discuss," I replied evenly. "You've met Lisa Chen, the Astor building manager, and these are—" Vanessa introduced her team mechanically, still processing this unexpected dynamic. The IT director, Alan Hoffman, nodded stiffly, clearly unhappy about being summoned to defend his department's actions. The two technical staff looked uncomfortable, likely aware their override attempts had triggered system alerts and created this high-level meeting. "Well," Vanessa said as we all took our seats, "this is an interesting situation. I had no idea when we selected the Astor building that we'd be dealing with Nathan's company as the systems provider." "A fortunate coincidence," I said neutrally. "Now, I understand Pinnacle has been experiencing some issues with the building management system. Perhaps Mr. Hoffman could outline your specific concerns." Alan launched into a technical critique of the Evergreen system, its overly restrictive temperature parameters, its inflexible lighting controls, its intrusive monitoring of energy usage patterns. As he spoke, Maya pulled up the relevant system logs on the conference room screen, displaying the exact override attempts and the system's automatic corrections. "As you can see," she explained when Alan finished, "the system is functioning exactly as designed. The parameters aren't arbitrary. They're calibrated to maintain optimal energy efficiency while ensuring occupant comfort within industry standard ranges." "Industry standards aren't always appropriate for premier tech companies," Vanessa interjected smoothly. "Pinnacle Solutions prides itself on creating optimal working environments for our teams. Our previous offices allowed us complete control over our space, which likely contributed to your previous building's poor energy efficiency rating," Maya noted, pulling up a comparative analysis. "The Astor building maintains a platinum efficiency certification specifically because the system prevents the kind of adjustments your team has been attempting." Vanessa's smile tightened. "I appreciate the environmental considerations, but surely there's room for reasonable accommodations, particularly for anchor tenants leasing multiple floors." Lisa Chen cleared her throat. "All tenants in the Astor are subject to the same system parameters, Ms. Reeves. It's outlined clearly in Section 8.3 of your lease agreement, which your legal team reviewed and approved." "Contracts can be amended," Vanessa countered, shifting her attention to me. "Especially when there are personal connections involved. Surely as Evergreen's CEO, you have some flexibility in system implementation?" And there it was, the first attempt to leverage our family relationship for special treatment. The assumption that rules applied to others more rigidly than to her. The expectation that I would naturally prioritize her comfort over the building's sustainability commitments. "The system parameters are non-negotiable," I said calmly. "Not because Evergreen lacks flexibility, but because the Astor Building's ownership has made energy efficiency a cornerstone of their property management philosophy. Any exceptions would compromise the building's performance metrics and certification status. Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly. The building ownership, she repeated. And who exactly would that be? I've been trying to arrange a meeting with them directly, but Ms. Chen indicated they prefer to work through management. The moment had arrived, not manufactured, not orchestrated, but emerging naturally from the conversation. I glanced at Lisa, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Green Horizon Properties is the official owner of the Astor Building, Lisa stated matter-of-factly. They acquired it 3 years ago specifically to implement next-generation sustainable building systems. Green Horizon, Vanessa said slowly, the name clearly unfamiliar to her. And they've contracted with Evergreen for the building systems? Not exactly, I said, meeting her gaze directly. Green Horizon Properties is a real estate investment vehicle that I established to acquire buildings suitable for evergreens. Technology implementation. The two companies are separate entities, but with aligned objectives and overlapping ownership. The conference room went absolutely silent. I could see the pieces clicking into place behind Vanessa's eyes, the implications, assembling themselves into a new reality she hadn't considered possible. You're saying, she began carefully, that you own this building, the Astor Building, where Pinnacle just signed a 15-year lease? Green Horizon owns it, I clarified. I am Green Horizon's founder and majority shareholder, Alan. Hoffman looked between us with growing discomfort, clearly sensing the personal undercurrents beneath this professional revelation. The technical staff stared at their tablets, suddenly fascinated by system diagrams they'd been ignoring moments before. Vanessa laughed, a short, incredulous sound. So all this time, while everyone thought you were? She stopped, recalibrating in real time. Why didn't you say something when you knew Pinnacle was moving into the Astor? It was the question I'd anticipated, the one that revealed how fundamentally she had misunderstood my motivations all along. She assumed I had kept this connection secret to orchestrate this very moment, to create a dramatic reveal that would maximize her discomfort and my vindication. It wasn't relevant to your company's leasing decision, I said simply. The Astor Building was the right space for Pinnacle based on location, amenities, and pricing. The ownership structure doesn't change that. And the system parameters would be the same regardless of who owned the building or who leased the space. But we're family, she insisted, lowering her voice as if that might make this conversation more private despite our audience. Which is exactly why I maintained professional separation, I replied. Pinnacle signed the same lease agreement as every other tenant in this building. The same terms, the same conditions, the same expectations regarding system compliance. She stared at me, searching my face for something, smugness perhaps, or the satisfaction of having orchestrated her company into this position. Finding none, she seemed momentarily at a loss. I think, Lisa interjected smoothly, we should refocus on resolving Pinnacle's specific concerns within the established system parameters. Perhaps we could discuss customization options that wouldn't compromise the building's efficiency metrics. Maya nodded, picking up the thread. We can adjust notification protocols, create user-friendly interfaces tailored to Pinnacle's workflows, integrate with your existing systems where appropriate. There's considerable flexibility within the established parameters. The meeting proceeded along these technical lines for another 45 minutes, with Maya and Alan identifying potential accommodations that would address Pinnacle's concerns, without undermining the building's sustainability commitments. Vanessa participated minimally, her usual assertive presence subdued by the unexpected revelation about the building's ownership. As the discussion concluded and next steps were agreed upon, Lisa and the Pinnacle technical team filed out, leaving Vanessa, Maya, and me in the conference room. Maya glanced between us, sensing the need for privacy. I'll start documenting, Those customization options, she said, making a graceful exit and closing the door behind her. For a moment, Vanessa and I simply looked at each other across the conference table. My sister, always so confident, so certain, so practiced in professional poise, seemed genuinely thrown off balance for the first time in our adult relationship. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked finally. "At dinner yesterday, or when we first signed the lease, or at any point in between? Why let me find out like this?" "Would it have mattered when you found out?" I countered. "Would it have changed? Anything about how you viewed my work for the past 3 years?" She looked away, uncharacteristically hesitant. "I don't know. Maybe. Probably." Her gaze returned to me, more direct now. "How did this even happen? Last I knew, you were working out of that converted warehouse space, bootstrapping your little—" She caught herself. "Your company? And now you own the Astor building? One of the premier properties downtown?" "Not just the Astor," I said quietly. "Green Horizon has acquired 7 properties over the past 3 years, all implementing evergreen systems, all showing improved efficiency metrics and increased valuation." 7 buildings, she repeated, the scale of this revelation sinking. "And while everyone thought you were struggling, while Dad was still sending you job listings, while I was—" She trailed off, unable to complete the thought. "While you were pitying me," I finished for her, "offering me entry-level positions at Pinnacle, explaining to family friends that I was finding myself, or exploring alternatives." She had the grace to look genuinely uncomfortable. "I was concerned. We all were. You left a lucrative career for an unproven startup in a niche market. It looked like a misstep from the outside." "It looked that way because you weren't really looking," I said, not unkindly. "You saw what you expected to see: failure, struggle, a detour from the path you understood. You never asked about our client list, our growth trajectory, our investment, partnerships. You assumed that because I wasn't broadcasting my success in ways you recognized, there was no success to broadcast." Vanessa was silent for a long moment, absorbing this. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its defensive edge. "You're right. I didn't really ask. I just assumed." "We all see the world through our own frameworks," I acknowledged. "Your path has been different from mine, more visible, more traditional, more aligned with what Dad considers success. That doesn't make it wrong. It just makes it yours. And meanwhile, you've been building an empire so quietly that your own family didn't notice," she said, a hint of reluctant admiration creeping into her voice. "Not an empire," I corrected. "Just something meaningful, something aligned with my values rather than someone else's expectations." She considered this, then gestured around Evergreen's modest conference room. "But why all this? The converted warehouse office, the simple apartment, the electric bike you mentioned at dinner? If you're as successful as owning the Astor suggests, why not?" "Show it?" It was such a Vanessa question, so perfectly encapsulating the difference in our approaches to success. In her world, achievement required witnesses, external validation, visible markers of status. The corner office with the premium view, the luxury car, the designer wardrobe, all signaling to others that she had arrived. "Because I'm not building this for show," I said simply. "The warehouse office works for our team. The apartment meets my needs. The bike gets me where I'm going while aligning with my environmental values. Success doesn't always look like what we're taught to expect." She shook her head slowly, still processing. "Wait until Dad finds out. He's going to be—" "Don't," I interjected. "This isn't about vindicating my choices to the family. It's about the work itself. The buildings we're making more sustainable, the systems we're refining, the impact we're creating. If you want to share this with Dad and Mom, I can't stop you. But that's not why I built any of this." Vanessa studied me with new eyes, Not the patronizing older sister evaluating her wayward brother, but a fellow professional reassessing a peer she had misjudged. "You've changed," she said finally. "Not really," I replied. "I've just become more fully who I already was. The difference is that now you're seeing it." She nodded slowly, accepting this. "So what happens now? With Pinnacle and the Aster? With—" she gestured between us. "This? Professionally, nothing changes. Pinnacle remains a valued tenant in the Aster building. Evergreen continues providing system support and implementing the customizations Maya outlined. Business proceeds. As usual." I paused. "Personally, that's up to us. How we navigate this new understanding. It's going to be awkward," she admitted. "Only if we make it awkward," I countered. "We could view this as an opportunity instead. A chance to see each other more clearly, beyond the roles we've been playing in the family narrative." She considered this, then stood, smoothing her impeccable blazer. "I should get back to the office. My team will be waiting for updates." She hesitated. "We're still on for Sunday dinner at Mom and Dad's?" "Unless you'd prefer I make an excuse this time," I offered. "Give you space to process all this." Vanessa shook her head. "No, I think it's time we all saw each other more clearly." She extended her hand formally, a gesture that acknowledged our new professional relationship. "Thank you for the meeting, Nathan. It was illuminating." I accepted her handshake, noting the subtle shift in her demeanor, less condescension, more genuine respect. Not dramatic, not complete, but a beginning. After she left, I remained in the conference room, reflecting on the meeting. It had unfolded differently than I had imagined during those late nights when doubt crept in, when the weight of family disappointment had felt heaviest. There had been no dramatic confrontation, no tearful apologies, no sweeping declarations. Just a quiet recalibration, a shift in perspective, the first steps toward a more authentic relationship. Maya reappeared, coffee cups in hand again. "Well?" she prompted, setting one in front of me. "Well," I echoed, "it went about as I expected." "Meaning?" "Meaning she was surprised but adapting quickly, processing the implications, recalibrating. Her understanding of the past 3 years." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "And how does it feel? Being seen clearly after all this time?" I considered the question carefully. Less cathartic than I might have expected. More peaceful. Like setting down a weight I didn't realize I was carrying. "The weight of being misunderstood," she suggested. "The weight of caring that I was misunderstood," I corrected. "The truth is, I stopped needing their validation a while ago. This revelation was inevitable, but it wasn't necessary. Not for me, anyway. Maybe for Vanessa. Maybe for the family dynamic. But not for the work itself." Maya smiled, understanding. "The work speaks for itself." "Eventually," I agreed. "If it's solid enough, honest enough, aligned enough with what matters. The challenge is continuing to build during all the time it takes for others to see what you already know to be true." My phone buzzed with a notification. The Brisbane implementation team was ready for the kickoff meeting. The day's work continued, uninterrupted by personal revelations or family reckonings. The buildings still needed better systems. The clients still needed support. The team still needed leadership. Success wasn't a destination reached or a score settled. It wasn't my sister's wide-eyed realization, or my father's eventual acknowledgement, or even the growing portfolio of properties under Green Horizons management. It was the daily choice to build something meaningful, something aligned with my values, something that would outlast today's victories and tomorrow's challenges. As I gathered my materials for the Brisbane meeting, I found myself reflecting on the broader lesson of the morning's revelation. So many of us spend our lives waiting for others to recognize our worth, to validate our choices, to acknowledge our success. We measure our progress by external recognition rather than internal alignment. We pursue paths designed to impress observers rather than fulfill our own purposeful vision. But what if we built for impact rather than applause? What if we measured success by meaning created rather than status acquired? What if we trusted our own values enough to follow them, even when, especially when, others couldn't yet see where they were leading? The Astor Building stood as physical proof of what could be built while others were busy doubting. Not just the property itself, but the principles it embodied: sustainability over convenience, long-term thinking over immediate gratification, systems designed to serve larger purposes than individual preferences. As I stepped into the Brisbane kickoff meeting, I carried this understanding with me, not as a shield against criticism or a weapon against doubters, but as a quiet certainty that illuminated the path forward. The work would speak for itself in time. My job wasn't to convince others of its value, but to ensure it had value worth discovering. And in that certainty lay a freedom no corner office or prestigious title could confer: the freedom to build something truly one's own, measured by standards truly worth meeting, creating impact that outlasted both criticism and praise. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload. From us,